when Donald Trump decided to attend and speak at what has been described as a massive and unprecedented gathering of America's top military leaders. It immediately set off waves of curiosity and criticism. On the surface, Trump presented the event as something ceremonial, a morale-boosting occasion, and even downplayed its significance by describing it as just a nice meeting to talk about how well the U.S. military is doing. His words suggested it was meant to be uplifting, centered on esprit de corps, and not tied to any sudden crisis or looming policy shift. But the way this event was put together, the timing, the cost, and the very scale of it all have generated an entirely different conversation about what might really be going on, and whether the explanation we've been given is the whole truth. The gathering itself was called by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who has been very outspoken in the past about cutting down the number of general and flag officers by as much as 20%. This makes the event even more unusual. We're talking about hundreds of generals and admirals, all one-star rank and above, flown in from across the country and from commands abroad, brought together at Quantico, Virginia. In military terms, this is almost unheard of. Usually, such a concentration of senior leaders only happens in wartime councils, major transitions, or very carefully planned long-term conferences. Doing it at short notice adds another layer of complexity. From the Trump camp, the message has been simple. Nothing to see here beyond a morale rally, a chance to show strength, to reassure the public and the troops that the military is in great shape. That kind of spin makes sense politically because it frames the gathering in patriotic and positive terms. But if you listen to Democrats in Congress, especially voices like Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois, the tone shifts dramatically. Duckworth and others immediately started asking hard questions about the costs, the security risks, and the rationale. After all, moving this many senior officers across the country, housing them, providing the necessary logistics and security, it does not come cheap. Some estimates put the price tag at tens of millions of dollars, money that could arguably have been saved if the meeting were virtual or broken into smaller regional events. Duckworth specifically demanded to know whether those alternatives had even been considered and which budgets were being used to cover such a massive expense. That line of questioning quickly feeds into a deeper concern. Is this event really just about morale, or is there a hidden agenda? Given Hegseth's previous push to slash the general officer corps, some critics believe the meeting could be laying the groundwork for exactly that kind of reform. Imagine bringing the entire group together, delivering a strong message about unity and readiness, but also signaling that cuts or restructuring are coming. That would be politically savvy in a way, because it wraps potentially painful news in a patriotic package. But it also risks creating unease within the ranks and could be seen as politicizing the armed forces. And that's the other major critique. Democrats and some independent analysts argue that putting so many military leaders on display in front of a sitting president known for using spectacle to his advantage risks blurring the line between military professionalism and political theater. The United States has always valued civilian control of the military, but it has also traditionally kept the military at arm's length from overt political staging. This kind of gathering raises questions about whether those norms are being respected or eroded. On the other hand, Trump's defenders would argue that morale matters. After years of global deployments, recruitment challenges, debates about defense spending, and questions about readiness, there is value in bringing leaders together to hear directly from the commander-in-chief. They would frame it as reassurance at a time when the U.S. faces multiple international challenges, from Russian aggression to tensions in the Middle East to China's assertiveness in the Pacific. Having generals and admirals gathered in one place, receiving the same message, could help unify thinking and foster alignment at the top. And Trump has always believed in the power of spectacle as a form of messaging. In his worldview, the bigger and flashier the display, the stronger the impression of confidence and control. But the problem with spectacle is that it invites skepticism. For critics, it is not enough to say this is about esprit de corps. They look at the broader pattern Trump has consistently pushed for bold, media, friendly shows of power, whether military parades, troop deployments at the border, or high-profile summits. Each time, the political benefits are obvious. He gets to showcase himself as the leader of a strong America. But the costs, both financial and institutional, often become points of contention. This latest gathering fits that mold perfectly. The White House calls it uplifting, but Democrats see it as expensive political theater with hidden motives. There's also the matter of security. Concentrating such a large portion of the U.S. military's senior leadership in a single location is risky. If anything were to happen, even an accident, the chain of command could be disrupted. Normally, the military avoids putting too many top leaders in the same place for exactly this reason. Critics point out that Trump's desire for spectacle may have outweighed traditional caution, though Pentagon officials insist that security protocols are in place. Still, the fact that this was done at short notice increases the perception of risk. Another interesting angle is how this plays internationally. Adversaries and allies alike are watching. A massive gathering of generals could be read as a show of strength, a reminder that the U.S. military remains cohesive and capable. But if framed poorly, it could also look like insecurity, a need to demonstrate control because of doubts within. For example, if China or Russia sees this as an internal messaging exercise rather than an operational necessity, they might conclude that U.S. leadership feels it needs to shore up confidence at home. That could embolden adversaries in subtle ways. In domestic politics, however, the optics may be what really matters. Trump has always thrived on visuals that convey dominance. Just as he once staged rallies to show massive crowds cheering him on, staging a gathering of the nation's top brass sends a visual message of loyalty, discipline, and power. For supporters, it reinforces the image of Trump as commander-in-chief in full control. For opponents, it reinforces fears of politicization and waste. This tension between spectacle as morale and spectacle as politicization is at the heart of the debate. If the event truly is just about morale, then perhaps it will pass as a symbolic gesture with limited long-term consequence. But if it is tied to Hegseth's agenda of cutting the General Officer Corps, then we may see ripple effects in military structure in the coming months. And if it is primarily about political optics, then the real impact will be in how it shapes public perception going into an election season. There's also a philosophical question here about what leadership in the military should look like. Is it about quiet competence, efficient use of resources, and keeping the armed forces out of political spectacle? Or is it about dramatic displays that remind both the public and the world of American power? Trump and his critics clearly fall on opposite ends of that spectrum. His style is unapologetically theatrical, while his critics favor restraint and prudence. At the end of the day, the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. There may not be a secret, sinister motive behind the gathering, but there is certainly more at play than just morale. Leaders rarely move hundreds of generals across continents for no reason at all. It's reasonable to suspect that messages about future reforms, priorities, and expectations will be delivered behind closed doors, even if the public presentation remains cheerful and ceremonial. What we do know is that the event has already achieved one of Trump's likely goals. People are talking about it. The very debate over costs, motives, and risk keeps him in the spotlight, framed once again as the central figure commanding attention. Whether you see that as strong leadership or manipulative showmanship depends largely on your political perspective. But in either case, the gathering underscores how Trump continues to govern through bold, disruptive gestures that force everyone else to react. In the months ahead, what will matter most is not the event itself, but what follows. If we see structural changes in the officer corps, then the gathering may be remembered as the prelude to reform. If nothing significant happens, it may fade into memory as another Trumpian spectacle that consumed headlines without changing policy. Either way, it has raised important questions about cost, security, transparency, and the role of military leadership in the political arena. And those questions are not going away, because they touch on the deeper balance between civilian authority, military professionalism, and political theater in American democracy.